Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Mystic in Training podcast with me, your host, Melissa Amos. Today, we are going to be diving deep into one of my most favorite subjects, and actually into one of the realms that I get asked the most about, and that is the Akashic Records. Now, I think even the name brings up some feelings, some intrigue, some curiosity. I know when I first heard the words, the Akashic Records, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I was like, what are these mystical, magical records that you speak of? And the more I've discovered and the more I have journeyed into the space, the more mystical and magical they become. And the more I understand actually quite how important the Akashic Records are, not just as a library of the past, but as a living, breathing field that we are consistently writing in every single moment of every single day. So this one is for you. If you've ever had the big questions about life, about incarnation, about the way that these spiritual concepts seem to work, and you'd like to know a little more about the Akashic Records and how they work with us. So let's dive straight in, shall we? Maybe we should start with what the Akashic Records actually are. So you can imagine them as a field of information that contains everything that us as a soul have ever done, thought, said, been, desired, felt, dreamt, experienced. And it's all contained in what was once known as a library. I think now it's more relevant to say that it's more like a superhighway of information. With technology nowadays, it's probably easier to comprehend than it ever was. So it's almost like your Google Drive of information with all of the cookies. And you know that spooky thing where the algorithm just seems to know even what it is that you're thinking. All of that too. I remember once considering what the Akashic Records are and how they work, and I got this image of the people in court who sit there and they're typing everything super fast about everything that's happening in the moment. And I kind of see it as we have this little version of us typing everything as it's happening. And it all gets recorded in this super highway of information. Now, what's incredible about the records is that there is no judgment. And so everything that is recorded is simply recorded as it is happening. And we can look at it like this, that when you imagine an incident, so something's happening, something's you're experiencing at the moment, there's the physical thing that's happening, the actual truth of what is the action or what is the perception of what's happening in the moment. And then there's all the stuff that sits behind it. What we think about it, how we respond to it, what we feel about it, what memories that brings up of other things that have happened that are similar or that are in contrast. And the records are recording all of that in real time, in the moment, all as fact and all as truth. And so you can imagine the depth held in this field. Now, what's important to remember or to know is that the Akashic Records have zero judgment. They're not sitting there. It's not like certainly what I was taught about the book of life, that we're either scored as good or bad. It's just scored. It just is. Everything is happening. And everything that we're feeding in there is influencing who it is that we're becoming and how it is that we are acting and what it is that we believe in every moment. In fact, when we think about things like confirmation bias, we can begin to understand that if we have a load of records that are helping us believe that something is true because of all of the experiences that we had, and not just the experience, but all of the ways that we think about it, all the ways that we feel about it, and all of the other memories that we're holding in our system are coming into the moment as something similar or contrasting is happening, then you can begin to understand that our perception of what's going on certainly gets filtered, if you like, by the unique lens that we are. And I think that goes beyond psychology. I think the answer to all of that and to the depth of that and what sits in that 95% on the subconscious, I think that this is when we're tapping into a field such as the Akashic Records. Now, when I first learned about the records, a lot of the research that was done and it's about how the records hold everything of the past, how it is everything that has been said, done, felt, experienced. And we've been working with the records or using the records to go back in time, essentially, to locate past memories, to understand what was happening in this moment, and then to do something with that, to either come with a new perspective, a new level of understanding so that we can begin to change and understand that that is no longer true there. Or to go and create some form of ceremony or ritual around the energy that was experienced in there. And this is a practice that we might do in hypnotherapy, for example, where we go back to a memory and we can change how we felt about the moment, or we can bring an empowerment in there. And we are essentially rewriting the way that we are responding to the truth of what happened in that moment, or certainly what's echoed in there. Now, all of that is created and held in your Akashic Records. Now, what is so incredible, what is so exciting, I think, about this, that we move from the idea of it being a library and we move into the idea of it being more like a living, breathing field, this superhighway of information. It starts to help us notice that what it was that happened and what it is that we experienced is malleable. That sometimes, and this was something that happened for me, as we go back into this field, as we go back into the memory, and we're in the Akashic Records, this is the difference between going back into a memory through, say, hypnotherapy or through the Akashic Records or even through past life regression, is that when we're in the records, we're actually entering through this field of compassion. We're entering through this field of non-judgment. That everything that we're experiencing, we are now seeing, if you like, through the eyes of our soul, which isn't going, that was good, that was bad, which isn't then bringing up all of the feelings in a subjective way, but we are experiencing from more objectivity. We're beginning to understand who we were as a child or who we were in a life once lived and how we showed up and what we believed and how we behaved and what we thought and what stories we took from the information that happened. But we're coming from it from this space of, this is what happened. We're coming from it really from a higher vibrationary field, which comes from acceptance, which comes from curiosity, which comes from wonder. And now as we go back into that memory, rather than it's offering us the shame or the guilt or the anger or the fear or the misunderstanding or the blame or the victimhood, well, now we're coming back and we're just curious. Now we're coming back and we're going, this is what happened. I wonder what it taught me. I wonder how that affected me in future actions. I wonder what that led me to believe. I wonder what values I created because of that. And we can begin to piece together the stories that we've created and the ripple effect that this one incident's had. And we can go back and we can, I don't think lessen the impact is the right idea, but we can come into the acceptance of it. And we can, for want of a better term, we can close that record. So it's no longer like an open book or no longer like a radio dial, just continually playing in our head. Who's had that? When we've done something, silly, or worse, or we said something and we're like, I shouldn't have said that, I'm really regretting it. And then you go to bed at night, or you're sitting in meditation, or you're doing the washing up, or you're going for a walk or something, and then it like echoes and it haunts you. Where's that information coming from? Maybe it's the Akashic Records going, hey, look at me. There's something we need to do here. And when we come back to it and we look at it and we really listen to it and we really understand it and we notice from this higher perspective, well, now the radio doesn't need to be on, looping in our minds all of the time. Now that record doesn't need to be open because we've learned from it, we've grown from it, we've understood it. We may even find some gratitude towards it because we realize that it led us to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And now we can close it down. So it's no longer our guidebook. So it's no longer haunting us in our quiet moments. It's no longer when an experience happens in this life and it reminds us, it triggers that memory, it triggers that response. It no longer goes, whoop, we've done this before. Here we go. Here's all the information. It just goes, we've experienced it before. We now know how to do better. Let's bring a new resource up. Let's put this one to bed. So this wants to come through as I'm speaking about this. For me, when I'm working in the records, it's not really about changing what happened. Whilst we can, and there can be benefits to it, we don't really want to change what happened. But what we really want to do is change how we feel about what happened and the consequences of that decision moving forward in the now, in the moment. And so what I've discovered is that when we're working with the Akashic Records with the view of the past, of who was I, well, then we can really begin to understand who am I and who am I not? And why am I behaving the way that I'm behaving? And why am I believing what I'm believing? And why am I acting or reacting? You even think of the term reacting. I'm acting again based on what was, because these are dominant records in our field. Because here's the thing, that whilst the records contain everything, you think even over the last 10 minutes while you've been listening to this podcast, how many thoughts you've had, how many memories have come up, how many feelings that you've had, and maybe you're walking or you're driving or you're doing something else whilst you're listening to me, and all of that's going on. Every single thing is recorded, everything. But not everything in every moment is dominant. Not every record that you have is constantly feeding you, but there's certain ones. So we can start to look at records in terms of weight. So if we go back to the library analogy for this, we could think of some of our records are like little post-it notes, right? And some of our records are like A4 sheets of paper, right? So there's a whole, there's context. Some of our records are like a chapter in a book. Some of our records are like a whole book. And some of our records are like the 10 books of Outlander. 1,500 pages each. I know because I'm reading them. Is this the first time I've got Outlander into this podcast? How did we get to episode 11? BD listeners, if I did mention it before, please write in and tell me. I feel I have been disloyal to my favorite show. And so our records all have different weighting within that. And you can imagine that if we have 10 series of books about a particular incident, it's going to have more impact on you. It's going to have more weighting on you than just a sticky post-it note that may well fall off after it now has 25 other post-it notes stuck on top. And so we can start to understand that the records, whilst they don't have a preference, they work on our preferences, or rather, because some of them aren't preference, right? But rather our implied preference. Where is it that I'm focusing on most? Where is my attention going most of the time? What is my brain feeding me? What questions am I asking? What actions am I taking? Am I somebody who is always going towards the direction of her dreams? Or am I somebody who is more cautious? who has more of a negative bias and so is constantly looking about what could go wrong or what might happen, rather than, I wonder how it gets better than this. So you can begin to understand that when we are asking these different types of questions, we're going to get some really different types of answers. And it's like the librarians, if you like, at the library are like, oh, she's asking this. Oh, she's moving towards this. Let us go to the filing system. Here we go. Here is all the incidents of the past that confirm what it is that you're seeking, whether that's good or bad, whether that's helpful or not, whether that's moving you towards your dreams or away from drama. And the records aren't judging whether one is better or best. Saying that, I do believe that your soul is constantly, especially as we go more into working with the records, your soul gets louder and your soul has preference. Your soul thinks, well, there's lessons to be learned here, there's growth to be had, there's talents to be activated, there's karma to resolve. But from just this point of view, you understand that we're humans and we have free will, and that free will is respected above everything. And so we're using the free will essentially to decide which books we're taking out of the library, which ones we're reading, which audio books now have the volume on high and are playing away in the background, and which ones are louder and which ones are quieter and which ones are shut away. And sometimes it is that our talents are shut away. Sometimes it is that, oh, no, it's not safe to be seen, or I don't like anyone looking at me. Those things can be locked behind closed doors in the records to one day, maybe, hopefully, to be activated. But isn't it exciting to consider that we can work with this space, that we can begin to curate the library from the past, understand that everything that happened in there holds a record, which means that everything that happened in there holds a story or a clue or a gift or an invitation, as we were speaking about last week, an invitation into, what does this mean about me? How can I use this now? How can I work with this now? And am I choosing to keep on checking out the same books or the same genre in the library? Or maybe there's something new I can explore. I mean, really, the Akashic Records are like identity work on steroids. It really helped me understand how I was showing up and what I believed about myself. And that's not me changing the records, but that's me working with them. So I understand the choices that I have. This isn't to eradicate my challenges, but it's in order when I'm going through a challenge to go, okay, well, let's go into the resource library. And rather than get out all of the history books, which are confirming the bias that I have, let's get out the resource library and go, hey, what talents have I got? What tools are in my bag? What have I already lived through that can help me? How can I bring more love, compassion, understanding to this? Which does lead me on to the next thing, which I think we're going to have to speak about more in the next episode. What I understood when I first discovered the Akashic Records was that it was this library of the past, and that was how I worked with it. Imagine my surprise and delight after probably hundreds of readings that I realized that we've been missing the point. That all of those things that I said are amazing and they're incredible, and they've been some of the most life-changing work that I've done for myself. But the Akashic Records are recording now. They're recording in this moment. They're recording every single second of every single day. And before we dive into this on the next episode, I want you to consider that every moment of every day you are recording your records. And I just want you to ask, am I recording this from the bias of fear, of what if, of I can't, of I'm not good enough, of second guessing? Or am I recording this from wonder, from curiosity, from trust? From knowing that my soul is guiding me into something more, and me being open to the challenges that faces, me being excited with what may come up, dancing with the flow of the universe. If you were an Akashic record, what would you be writing? What would be the big identity that was there? What would you be delivering back to you from your library of information? What would your Google Drive be showing up as suggested resources? What would your AI bot feed back to you based on the questions that you're asking? This is what we need to discover. This is what we need to consider. And this is the real power that the Akashic records hold, and how we can work with them, all of us, each and every single one of us, every single day. And I promise you, this is going to make the biggest difference in your life. So we will discover more about that on the next episode of the Mystic in Training podcast. Be sure to use the contact me resources, comment below, and make sure that you subscribe by sharing this podcast and subscribing or downloading and leaving a review. It really helps this work get out there to the people that it's meant to receive. And it writes a beautiful record in there saying, this is important for me. It has been an honor as always. And thank you for listening to me, Melissa, on the Mystic in Training podcast.